grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Sampat, who is out of town.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Got to be patient with the folks on the screen. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And we do have two commissioners joining us, three of them. Commissioner Johnson, Luther, and Strader. Good morning. All right, can I get a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of the regular commission meeting on October 8th of 2025?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Executive Director, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, commissioners. Nice to see everyone this morning. Let me also just quickly shout out to our new employees who are with us here this morning. Morning again, everybody. We just visited this morning, just a terrific crew of folks joining the court. Really nice to have them here. Secondary shout out to Rochelle Luther, who was in Bloomberg this morning with a new job, promoted at Columbia Sportswear to Executive Vice President. Nice work, Commissioner.
Thanks.
You'll be much better general counsel than your predecessor.
I'll tell him you said
Another
that.
former port commissioner, Peter Bragdon. Also, just as a reminder from this morning, Dan Pippinger wished everyone a happy Veterans Day, and I want to second that. Yesterday, just a good day to remember. I talked with our girls about it, thanking the men and women who've served this country with their time and spirit, and in many cases their lives. And so happy belated Veterans Day to everyone. If I could have the next slide, I'd like to just bring up there we go, our safety champions. Marcos and Sean, two of our marine facility maintenance employees, Nick from aviation maintenance, and Brian from navigation. Just some great stories showing leadership. Interesting one, Marco and Sean were out landscape folks in our marine maintenance team, and were out when they came upon an accident on the road, and they essentially, because they're certified flaggers, they ended up flagging on site for an hour and a half to keep the emergency responders and the folks around the site safe. Just really terrific work. Proud of the work of our own team watching out for the safety of our neighbors and our friends and our coworkers and employees. Next, if I could, Steve Torres is here. Steve, would you come up and give us our safety message for the month? Steve is our Marine Security Manager. Nice to see you here. I have the same trouble with my jacket. My muscles are just about as big as yours. Good to have you here, Steve. Welcome.
My name's Steve Torres. I'm the Marine Security Manager for the Port of Portland. Recently, we updated our T6 emergency evacuation and communications procedures and conducted an emergency evacuation exercise of T6. The scenario was a hazmat container was leaking on the T6 dock face on berth 605, and one of the longshoremen notified another longshoreman. So we had everyone working at T6 that day gather at our primary gathering point located in the T6 admin parking lot. And once we accounted for everybody and sent them back, we had met up with our tenant, which was Harbor Industrial. Well, we gathered everybody, which was Harbor Industrial, ILWU, AWC, APS stevedoring, Jones stevedoring, and our marine facility maintenance teams and contractors throughout the marine terminal. And after the exercise, we had a hot wash with all the department heads from the Port of Portland, which is Fred Meyer, Bill McCormick, Jesse, and Andrew Hazel. Harbor Industrial, the safety person for Harbor Industrial that runs the container yard at LALB, came up to watch this event unfold and give any insight, since they also do this exercise down in Los Angeles. APS stevedoring department heads, which they're in charge of moving all the vehicles on and off the ships at berth 601 and 607. Jones stevedoring department heads, they're the ones that are in charge of like moving our large break bulk equipment, like if we have transformers or large equipment coming off of our 603 dock. AWC, which they're the ones that they're in charge of the autos for at berth 601 and 607. And then we had all the department heads from ILW, which is Local 92, which for those that don't know, Local 92 are the walking bosses, and they are in charge of the gangs from moving containers on and off the ships. Then we had Local 40, which are the clerks, and we had the chief supervisor there, and he's in charge of the CY gate and the placement of containers in the yard and knowing what trucks are bringing in what and which ones are departing with containers. And Local 8, their department heads, which they're the ones that are typically on the ships, connecting the container to the gantry cranes, and also putting the containers on the hustlers or the bomb carts for the hustlers and placing them throughout the yard. And the other agencies that were involved and notified in this were also the Coast Guard, CBP, TSA, Shaver, Columbia River Pilots, Portland Police Bureau, Portland Fire and Rescue, and the Portland Comm Center. During our hot wash, we addressed any of the loose ends in our emergency evacuation and exercise and communication. And one of the many issues were we needed new evacuation and gathering points map, which I have here in various sizes throughout our T6 Marine Terminal. As you can see here, I kind of modeled this after my former Coast Guard years under green, amber, red, where green is the primary access point. Amber, which is out here, or yellow, is like, well, we kind of have to get away from the front of T6 and off the terminal. And if things are really bad, red, which is over here by T5 in front of Portland Bulk Terminal and Columbia Export Terminal. So these maps were updated, and I wanted to say a huge thank you to Pat Ebert and Christine Chase, who helped me update these maps with the current GIS software, and being able to draw these lines and make the gathering points throughout on these maps for everybody to see throughout the marine terminals. Also, during this time for the communication procedures, we worked with Dan Blitzer, and he provided a radio bridge for a way for our marine security officers at T6 to be able to monitor any labor for first and second shifts 24/7 by having Harbor Industrial be able to get a hold of our marine security on a channel that bridges the 400 megahertz system over to our 800 megahertz system, so we can more quickly respond to events should they happen out at Marine Terminal 6. On a different note, we recently conducted a rope rescue drill with Portland Fire Bureau, rope rescue technical team at T4 and T6. This is our second year of doing this. This year I was really happy to be able to get T4 in there, which is Kinder Morgan, to be able to help get people off the soda ash loader should somebody get hurt up there. These rope rescue drills this year took place on October 27th at T6, the 29th at T4 at Kinder Morgan, and the 30th back at T6. The team conducted off the Grantee cranes. I don't know if you've ever been out there, but those are pretty big and pretty tall. They're one of the most robust pieces of equipment out on the Columbia River. And one of the scenarios we had of many was that there was somebody that had gotten hurt up on the apex of the gantry crane, which if you have the machine house, it's up above on top of there, which that is 190 feet above the ground. This scenario involved a person with a broken hip that needed to be packaged in a steel litter and lowered to the ground. Now, when they do these scenarios, the power has to be secured on the gantry cranes, and they have to walk up the sides of the stairs of the gantry cranes, which is a long haul. Like, I don't even know if I could do that on a normal day.
You could do it, Steve.
Let alone with all the equipment and steel litter and, all the ropes and stuff they need to bring up to the top of the apex to be able to lower them down. Another scenario they had was that they had the crane cab with the boom all the way out towards the end, and the person was having stroke symptoms, and they needed to bring them all the way to the 605 dock. And so that stretch from 250 from the crane cab all the way to the dock is 250 feet being brought back to the ground by ropes. So they did this last year, but it was in July and it was really nice and sunny and the weather was beautiful. The sun was shining. There was no wind, no waves, no nothing. But this year they had to do it during the middle of our storm coming through here. And so it provided a little bit more technical difficulty for being able to bring somebody in, which is they appreciated, because typically these situations don't happen on nice sunny days. They usually happen in the worst of conditions, under the worst weather and worst situations. So they're appreciative of that. So I'll go ahead and move on to the impacts of safety. Through this, we have now a emergency communications procedure in place at T6. So now we're monitoring labor 24/7. The updated T6 emergency evacuation procedures have been tested and revised to ensure all managers across understand what is expected in the event of an emergency at T6. We installed a new gate by Burr 603 down by the Shaver Tugs for emergency responders to gain access to the gantry cranes more easily, and also allow for parties at T6 to be able to depart T6 should there be a train blocking the main gate and our adjacent gate over by 607. That would be the only way in or out. So with that new gate, the fire trucks are able to get to the gantry cranes now easily. We updated our secondary and tertiary gathering points should we have to evacuate T6. We now have annual training with Portland Fire and Rescue on how to assist individuals in the event of an issue on our gantry cranes or our soda ash loader at Kinder Morgan. Emergency responders are now familiar with the Port of Portland's unique equipment, infrastructure, and layout. All shifts from Portland Fire and Rescue are familiar with our equipment and had to proceed should there be an incident. We also have communications directly with the Portland Fire and Rescue team that would have to conduct the rescue, since it's a special team with a unique set of skills that are required to help potentially injured people off of our equipment. These result in faster recovery of people should something happen on our marine terminals. And it also gave us a business need that I'm currently working with Ryan Parker and PJ with to get a grant to install some sirens, lights, and PA system for T4 and T6 that can reach everybody immediately. So right now we're working on that for some grants in the spring. I just want to say real quick, thank you to Steve Danielson, John Akery, Fred Meyer, Bill McCormick, and everyone here, and Andrew for allowing me to deliver the safety message for Marine. Bill McCormick allowed me to achieve these goals by working through the complexities of putting together and allowing me to collaborate with our business partners to enable these exercises to happen. There's a lot of moving pieces with this and a lot of agencies and people to work with to get this to happen. I believe these safety exercises have helped to eliminate harm through culture of prevention, curiosity, evaluation, and action.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Steve's point at the heart of it is really about the complexity of these environments and the need to practice and to be engaged with our partners. So thank you and the team very much for your focus on safety. Good to see you, Steve.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I'll whip through, a fair amount going on, as you know. First and foremost, government shutdown, we think, ends later today, although we'll see. Here at PDX, our federal partners at CBP and TSA and FAA honestly have just done yeoman's work, essentially without pay, for the last 40 odd days. We've had some flight reductions. We're about 6% over the weekend. We do think if we do end the shutdown, it'll take at least 3 or 4 days and maybe more like a week to get back to a full schedule. But, just a shout out to the great partners in our federal workforce here at PDX. They've just been incredible and are sticking through. We've also had great support from employees and partners, including concessionaires at the airport. with food and containers for dropping groceries and donation collection. That's been really terrific, and I'm grateful to everyone who was engaged in that process. Our team has really tried to stay engaged with our federal partners to see if there's anything we can do to help. And I feel good about where we are. We haven't seen any direct impacts. It's essentially the forced impacts that have really hit PDX. And, again, we hope to be through that here in the next week, I hope. We hosted last week Hillsborough Airport Fall Community Forum. It's really a chance to get the community together to talk about what's going on in Hillsborough. We heard from the community on a number of topics, including noise concerns and the future of avgas, which we've talked about here. No big surprises, but continued concern about health and safety around the facility. And we just appreciate the opportunity to engage with community in those conversations. A shout out to our own team. I know Christina and a few others were there to celebrate with the governor and the treasurer. It seemed like one of those don't put all of your elected officials in one conveyance, because there were a ton of really important people there celebrating the port's West Sundial Wetlands redevelopment plan, which is essentially an 82-acre site. My own kids planted trees there 4 or 5 years ago, so it was great to see the recognition. It was in conjunction with the Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park. Great ecosystem recovery work by the port, recognized by the Oregon Department of State Lands and the governor and treasurer and others. So thank you to the team, and the great partners at Mosaic Ecology and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde were also engaged. So just really terrific work. We were also recognized, strangely, that I got the credit for this, but Time 100 list on climate. Just a shout out to the port staff to be climate champions and to be catalysts for the change. In particular, the driver was at the PDX construction, the terminal core, but the recognition included a push on sustainable aviation fuel and on recycling and energy conservation, ground source heat pump. Just kudos to the port team whose work really is being recognized as catalyzing impact on climate change. So thank you to everyone who is engaged in that work. Commissioner Koba and Kimberly Branham and members of our trade team went a week, just now 2 weeks ago, to Korea and Japan with the governor. We met with a number of our customers, SM Line, Delta Airlines, Korean Air, Kanto Chemical, one of our tenants out here, or partners. They now own the land out at Rivergate. The governor's really focused on job creation and economic development. It was nice to get her out for her first trade mission. Appreciate Commissioner Koba, you coming with us and really making the pitch, in particular around direct air service and supporting our business partners on direct cargo service to T6. We are recognizing this month Native American Heritage Month. This year's theme is Lessons in Resilience, Story, and Difference. It's just a good opportunity for us at the port to remember the significance and the importance of listening to understand, to work on change. Oh, thank you. That's the trade mission, but that is the head of the American Chamber, and there's me with the governor. These are fabulous snapshots as I talk about Native American Heritage Month. But I do hope that this month is really a chance for us to reflect and respect and be in community. So hope everyone joins me in recognizing Native American Heritage Month. And then finally, this is the last commission meeting of Myra Arreola, who has been a great champion inside the port on equity and on including people from around our port community, both internally and externally, in the work we do. I'm grateful to you, Myra, and your leadership. It has been a great bonus for us to have Myra's voice in the room and her leadership on our executive team. So thank you very much for your service to the port and our community. It has been a terrific ride. Thank you. And that, Madam President, is the conclusion of my remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Curtis. I'd like to echo Curtis's comments, and I'm sure all the commission members would feel the same, to thank you, Myra, for all you've brought to the port and to hear your perspective and the value that you add to our conversations has been terrific, and we wish you nothing but the best. So thank you. Questions or comments for Curtis? All right, can I get a motion and a second for approval of the executive director's report?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I didn't look at our commissioners online to see if you had any questions. So if you did, we'll catch you next time. We are moving to our public comment section of our agenda. And as always, the Port welcomes public comment. We value it, and it's an important part of the work that we do. But since we always have a fairly full agenda, we ask that you keep your remarks to 2 minutes or less, and I will gently remind you if you're getting close to or over than those 2 minutes. We have 2 individuals here in person today and 3 online. And so I'm going to start with the members who are here in person, and I'd like to ask, sorry if I mispronounce, Terrell Garrett to come forward. Did I do it right?
Absolutely.
Good. Good morning.
Morning. I had to borrow these glasses. I forgot mine, so bear with me, please. City of Roses, or CORE, is the recycling subcontractor for the airport terminal remodel. Recently, the Multnomah County auditor found that CORE has been issuing construction recycling reports that were not factual, but rather estimated and non-compliant with LEED certification rules. Also, they found CORE did not recycle 90% as claimed, but rather only 16%. Related to this, GBCI that issues LEED certifications has and is conducting audits, resulting in the revocation of recycling points for multiple Portland projects. Multnomah County will have one project downgraded from gold to silver, as they will no longer be submitting CORE's numbers. All current Portland projects with CORE's participation have been flagged for audit, including your airport terminal remodel. The Port has received the same overstated, non-compliant 90% reports as Multnomah County, Portland Public Schools, Portland State University, and the City of Portland. Your environmental manager, when made aware of this problem in 2022, said the Port had not decided whether to seek LEED certification, so it didn't matter. Early this year, the current environmental manager and auditor were provided with incontrovertible proof of this false reporting. They refused to investigate and did nothing. The Port has received many awards and news articles for green building practices in the airport terminal remodel. The truth is not green building practices, but rather greenwashing. The entire terminal construction recycling program is a sham, and Port employees have endorsed this behavior, making them know better. The greenwashing is now public, and I ask that you direct your auditor to investigate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Mr. Craig Sheets. Welcome back, Mr. Sheets.
Yeah. Got 2 more ports to finish the Pacific, Tacoma and Seattle, and I'm going to the Great Lakes. I didn't have enough time last time, and I just got off the phone with the feds last night. Terrorists getting smuggled in containers. They will be in reefer units. It'll fool everybody. They'll be in down equipment, down jackets. Doesn't matter. They're going to need that in the summer because they would not make it. They dehydrate. They get here and they get through in law enforcement, which they probably will because they'll have military grade ordnance, which is weapons. Then I don't think the police are going to stand a chance. Then they're going to play games with our lives and probably end up making us kill each other. And the Fed said from third world countries, probably so. That will be what's sneaking in. The other thing that I didn't get in last time that's fresh, and I had to repeat meetings back in LA, San Diego, is nuclear missiles pointed at offshore oil wells. And there's a whole bunch of offshore Long Beach, and that's right around the port there. So I don't know how it works here, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce that to all the ports. As well, after I get done with the 2 northern ports up in Washington, I'm going to the Great Lakes, same problem. They destroy our water supply there with that. We're done. We won't see any rain cycles. These 2 moves right here will end us all. We all got to have water. Nothing lives without it. So I'm being pretty adamant about protecting Earth's water. And as well, I've been as well working on Geiger counters, scintillation counters to be used to be mounted on the cranes when they pull the containers off. They could put them at the truck stops. When the trucks roll by, send it off to a computer. It'll alert, and it'd be a lot simpler that way than a handheld one. but I don't see why not having a handheld one to issue to every employee that's walking around freight all day. All they gotta do is point it and it'll let us know what's in there. And offshore oil wells. Could
Mr.
be-
Sheets, you're at 2 minutes, so if you have a moment to wrap up.
I do. Offshore oil wells, restricted areas, and up in the hills, substations, meth labs, fentanyl. We know this country's been not well in our kids on the availability to kill them with narcotics. We're the #1 leader in that, killing our children. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Almost didn't make it.
All right, we have.
Take care, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Blaine Ackley joining us virtually.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Ackley?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Had trouble with the computer this morning, so I have to speak to you by phone. I'm calling about the transition plan, which, if you read it, is more of a polemic outlining the port's position and not a document meant to inform the public about the issue in an objective manner. Public documents need to contain factual evidence to inform the public and not conclusory statements without evidence to support them. The port's plan lacks any measurable, evidence-based, or meaningful objectives or timelines. And it's just sad to me that the port on page 2 can point to a 2016 study commissioned by the port saying that lead contamination is not a real problem, even though 1,641 pounds of lead contaminants are dumped on our community each year. Please remember that this study was done under a now false and scientifically dismissed premise that there was an allowable level of lead contamination. Any objective researcher will tell you that basing your assertions on a false premise negates any evidence you are presenting. I'm incredulous to find that the report also asserts on page 3 that there are many other sources of lead contamination, and then they list one of lead paint. And that lead paint could never equal the 1,600 pounds of lead dumped on us each year. We are the 8th most lead contaminated airport in the country. From
Mr.
the
Ackley,
beginning.
Mr. Ackley, you're at 2 minutes, so if you have a moment to wrap up, that would be great.
Okay, I'll wrap it up and say that I don't think the plan offers a real plan at all. It's an internal document. We need a plan to get rid of leaded gas in Hillsborough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, member of the public online is Mickey Barnes. Morning.
Good morning, Commissioner Koba, members of the commission. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'd like to open with a statement of protest against the use of PDX Hillsborough and other Oregon airports for perpetuating the inhumane, cruel, bigoted, and hateful deportation policies promoted by the Trump administration. Various media reports have stated that ICE Blackhawks surveillance helicopters are flying in and out of port-owned facilities. Please provide a concise public statement explaining your relationship with ICE as well as your role and/or complicity in deporting immigrants, migrants, refugees, and other valued members of our community. Now I will move to the topic of the unleaded avgas and transition plan report. I do want to endorse and support the comments made by Blaine Ackley. In the 17-year period between 2006 and 2023, Hillsborough released 14 tons, likely more, of lead into the environment. Despite widespread adverse impacts, there is no community-based advisory group in place to address public concerns. The port invited only a handful of negatively impacted community members to participate in the transition plan study meetings. Thus, the public, for the most part, was unaware these sessions were even taking place. There were no announcements in the local newspaper or on City of Hillsborough or Washington County websites. No elected officials attended. One of the supporting documents, which Blaine raised, the Washington County Public Health Report, was a non-peer-reviewed report. It appeared in 2016. Since 2016, there have been 4 additional studies, all finding, and this includes 500 airports and over 1 million blood level screenings, all of which have found that children living near airports have elevated blood levels. So
Ms. Burns, you are at 2 minutes, so if you can wrap up, it would be appreciated.
Okay, I will wrap up, and I want to, in wrapping up, I want to say that in the half hour I've been listening to this meeting, I've been targeted by 2 Hillsborough Aero Academy aircraft. I live 12 miles from the airport. One is in 49191. It was observed flying as slow as 21 knots over and in the vicinity of our home. The other one was in 606 GS at 9:57. I would ask you to kindly tell the users of the Hillsborough Airport to stop spewing their noxious emissions and noise over our home and over our community. This is unacceptable. These aerial assaults must stop.
Thank you.
Must stop now. And you are very welcome.
Thank you. All right, our final presenter, Elena Burgazova.
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, thanks for having me and letting me speak. I appreciate that. I can relate to Mickey's concern. I live in Southwest Portland, and I wanted to follow up on aircraft noise issue in our residential area. We're not even close to the airport, but we are impacted by the noise. And we have been reporting this last 4 years. The port noise management rejected our concern and keeps ignoring us now. We have the area of concerned people is expanding. For example, people from Burton Hillsdale moved from Hillsborough away from the Aero Academy and other private flights that were affecting them. They moved to our area a couple years ago and they were happy. And the last 4 years, they're also suffering from the noise. This is destroying our lives. This is really, we chose this area for being quiet and very livable. And I have been reporting this to the elected officials as well. The FAA points to the local airports. The airports point to the FAA. The elected officials are not really responding. Also reported that to the city commissioners of District 4. We're just not getting any help. So I wanted to follow up. You are in power and you are responsible for the airport management and how it impacts the communities. So please do something to help us. The planes are flying every 1, 3, 5, 15 minutes. You know, from being quiet to this, and 30 minutes from the airport. This is something unacceptable, and it should be reverted. Fly around Portland.
You are at 2 minutes.
Yeah, let me wrap up. So Portland is not big, so either fly around or fly higher, or undo whatever was implemented via this misguided and harmful NextGen program. Please help us.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Nemi.
Thank you for the comments, everybody who came to give public testimony. I would just like to ask that there's follow-up on the ICE requests at our next commission meeting.
We can certainly do that, Commissioner. I'll just tell you, we don't have a relationship with ICE. There's no contractual relationship with ICE. I think the misunderstanding is we do have a relationship with Customs and Border Protection at Hillsborough for on-site inspections, but no relationship at all, contractual or otherwise, with ICE. But we can certainly talk to you or bring something to the commission if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 general discussion items, and I'm going to ask Antoinette to introduce the first general discussion item.
Okay. Good morning, Madam President and Commissioners. Always a pleasure to be in front of you. We have the pleasure of bringing our annual audit before you today, a couple of reports that we will go through. I'd like to, at this time, have Ashley Tuttle and Ashley Osteen come before you. Now, in years past, you've seen Robert Burkett as the smiling face on this slide, and it just I'm delighted to have Ashley join us as the port's new controller. She started in June and stepped right in and is already just doing a great job. And so she walked into this audit and just excited for her to have an opportunity and you all to engage with her today and our audit partner, Ashley Osteen. The last thing I'll say is you'll note as we go through the reports, Ashley Osteen is now representing Baker Tilly, formerly known as Moss Adams. And so I will turn it over to them to talk to you about our fiscal 25 financial audit. All yours, Ashley.
Okay.
The other Ashley.
Okay, good morning. So we are here today to present to you the port's annual audit reports, of which there are 2 that you should have received copies of. Normally there are 3 reports, but the single audit has not been issued due to delays created by the federal government shutdown. So our external auditor from Baker Tilly will give you more information about what that means in her presentation, but we will communicate out the results of that audit once it has been completed. We'll also give you a brief overview of our fiscal 2025 results, and our external auditor will present to you their reports and required communications for the audits they performed. So we'll start with a brief review of some of the information in each of the audit reports, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Baker Tilly. Oh, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so starting with the financial results, we have the comparative income statement data for PDX, and that's comparing revenues and expenses for the fiscal years ending June 30, 2025 and 2024. So operating revenues increased by $54.5 million compared to FY24. And that was due to the impact of higher passenger counts on all of our passenger dependent revenue streams. In FY25, we had 18.1 million passengers at PDX compared to 16.7 million passengers in FY24. So we ended the year with passengers up about 8.3% versus the prior year. Operating expenses, excluding depreciation and amortization, were also up in FY25, coming in $23 million higher than FY24. And this is primarily due to the higher operating costs associated with higher passenger activity. Depreciation and amortization expense was up $42.8 million year over year. And the significant increase in depreciation was due to the asset values related to the TCOR project. So with the completion of the first phase of the project, those assets have been placed into service and have now begun depreciating. So we'll continue to see an increase in depreciation expense until we reach final completion on TCOR. And at that point, we'll start to see more stabilization in that area. In FY25, PDX reported non-operating expense of $6 million, which is a difference of $35.9 million when comparing to FY24's non-operating income of $29.9 million. And this shift was due to largely to 2 factors. One was the higher interest expense on debt service, as well as the remainder of federal ARPA funds having been fully recognized in the prior year. So as a result, net income for PDX was $25.2 million in FY25, and that was an overall decrease of $47.2 million from FY24. Next slide, please. So moving over to the high-level statement of net position, this is also sometimes referred to as the balance sheet. This table shows the final results for assets, liabilities, and net position. So just as a reminder, net position is just the mathematical difference between assets and liabilities. It's also the governmental financial reporting term for equity. I do want to point out that liabilities and net position for FY24 were restated, and that was due to the impacts of a new accounting standard, GASB Statement Number 101, for compensated absences. So this standard required governments to change how they calculate and report liabilities related to employee compensated absences. So for PDX, the restatement resulted in a roughly $1 million increase to liabilities and a $1 million decrease to net position in FY24. So you can see that PDX assets increased significantly during the year, and this was driven largely by the increase in capital assets related to TCOR, as well as positive net income for the year. Liabilities also increased significantly, and this was due to the issuance of the Series 30 revenue bonds. So overall, net position for PDX increased by $52.1 million in FY25. Next slide, please. So at the bottom of the slide, you'll see the June 30 balances for unrestricted cash and investments for PDX. Unrestricted cash and investments, which are available for any lawful airport purpose, increased $26.4 million in FY25. And this is primarily due to positive net income for PDX in FY25. So for more discussion on our FY25 performance, I would point you to the Management's Discussion and Analysis, or MD&A, section of the audit reports. The MD&A provides an overview of the port's financial performance and operations, and it highlights key factors that impacted our FY25 results. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving over to the high-level comparative income statement for the general fund. So the general fund is referenced as marine and other in the audit reports we've given you. FY25 operating revenues decreased about $11.2 million versus FY24. This was primarily attributable to land sales that were recorded in FY24, as the port did not conduct any land sales in FY25. So this decrease in operating revenues was slightly offset by an increase in charges for services as a result of higher rent revenues on industrial properties and higher revenues resulting from increased grain and mineral bulk volumes. FY25 operating expenses, excluding depreciation and amortization, decreased $2.5 million. This was associated with lower material and equipment expenses, as well as lower internal central service costs. In addition, there were no costs associated with land sales in FY25, which made an impact. So these decreases were partially offset by modest increases in salaries and wages expense and longshore labor expenses associated with higher container throughput activity. Depreciation and amortization expense remained relatively flat year over year, and non-operating income increased by $4.6 million over the prior year. This was mainly due to an increase in revenue of interest revenue, of $10.3 million versus the prior year, which was a result of higher cash balances and higher investment returns. And that increase was partially offset by a decrease of $5.9 million in one-time non-operating revenues in FY25. So the net result of all these items was a positive net income of $37.6 million for the general fund in FY25. Next slide, please. Moving on to the high-level net position information for the general fund. So again, FY24 was restated to account for the retroactive implementation of GASB Statement Number 101. The impact of the restatement to marine and other was roughly $1.4 million increase to liabilities and a decrease to net position for the same amount. So you can see that total assets increased roughly $80 million, while liabilities increased $29.2 million during the year. And this resulted in an increase to the general fund net position of $50.7 million. So this increase was due to the positive net income for the year, as well as capital grants and transfers from PDX to fund general aviation capital. Next slide. At the bottom of the slide, we have unrestricted cash and investments for the general fund. You can see the balance increased by $47.2 million from FY24. This is also the result of positive net income as well as grants and transfers from PDX. Next slide. So the last report we've given you is the report on passenger facility charges, which we generally refer to as PFCs. Just as a reminder, PFCs are assessed on enplaned passengers. The fee is collected by the airlines and remitted to the airport to be spent on FAA-approved projects. The PFC report starts with the same information as the report on audited financial statements, but starting on page 47, information specific to the PFC program is included, as is Baker Tilly's report on compliance and internal control over compliance related to the FAA's PFC program. So you can see that PFC collections were up $2.2 million as we experienced employment growth in FY25. Interest earnings on PFC balances remained flat year over year, and PFC expenditures in FY25 were $2.5 million, and that is related to debt service payments on PFC revenue bonds. So with that concludes my review of the audit reports. Before I hand things over to Baker Tilly, I would like to pause for a moment in case there are any questions.
Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Adams.
Hi, Ashley. I love accountants. I love accounting, mostly because it's magic that I just don't understand. Pluses and minuses are hard for me, but I'm trying to understand the non-operating revenue line
For
maybe it was your fourth slide. I don't know what
for
page.
PDX?
Yeah, for PDX.
Okay.
So is that mostly interest on cash balances? What's generating the non-operating income for airport operations?
Yes, so the non-operating income is interest on interest, PFCs, CFCs.
Okay, so it's more than interest on.
And some than non-operating grant income is also in there.
I see. And is the account accruing interest for airport operations just pass through cash, or is it balances on bond issuance? Like what's accumulating interest in airport operations? Like what's the source of that cash? Is it operating revenue? Is it?
It's operating revenues. It should be unspent bond proceeds.
Okay.
Cash reserve, payments reserved for debt service.
Mm-hmm.
Any cash or investments held by the airport funds.
Got it. So as the bond proceeds, and I assume that's a big chunk, are used to fund the airport redevelopment plan, then that expected non-operating revenue would decline over time. Is that the expectation?
Potentially, yes, as the cash balance.
Assuming the other stuff doesn't go up.
Correct.
The same amount. Okay. So then what happens with the non-operating revenue for airport operations? Is it stuck in airport operations? So it can't be used in the rest of the non-airport related port business. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Right. So then over time, do you just carry it? Do you spend it? What happens to it?
Yeah, so we do hold. I just open it up to Dan and he just tells me what he needs, right? He and Kimberly. So yeah, so we there you go. So this is the trick. So we hold the way we convert that is like by days cash on hand. And so there's going to be a minimum amount of days cash on hand that we have. So whether it's generated through non-operating or operations, you have restricted and unrestricted cash. Focus on the unrestricted cash. we have the opportunity to use that to basically fund ourselves, right? Whether capital projects, or at least a portion of that for capital projects across the airport. And the same would hold true on the general fund side. I want to be careful though about the restricted proceeds, because we will not use those for airport operations, so any earnings. So we can net that against any potential debt service that we would need to pay,
Okay, so you
or pay down debt, I should say.
think
Yeah.
you got to my ultimate question, which is interest on airport stuff is unrestricted revenue.
Depends on the funding, right? So if we're generating operating revenue from the airport, that would be cash that can be reinvested. Now, our funding stack is cash, debt, and grants. So when we have cash that comes through our financial structure and it's bond proceeds, that's going to be segregated and set aside and used specifically for the capital projects that it was intended to when we issue that debt,
Including interest.
including the interest.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Happy to spend more time with you on that,
Well, I'm just thinking
even
about
afterwards.
the tail of interest revenue as we spend down the bond proceeds. So sort of thinking about whether cumulatively that's material. Do we need to pay attention? It sounds like it's
Mhm.
not, but it can be significant, but not material. Is that right?
It can. Let me focus on the unrestricted side of that and just give a little bit of a shout out to our treasury team, right? So if you think about, so this year, our investment performance on the unrestricted side, again, if you think about the cash that's kicked off from operations, our performance for fiscal 25 was 3.8, like 3.79, 3.8. And if you think about where, we can make investments inside of 5 years, our weighted average maturity of those decisions that we're making around investments is about a little north of 2, just in terms of maturity. So if we just waited for the portfolio to completely wind down, it would take roughly 2 years. That's how we are extended. We also take a look at where we think the yield curve is going to be going. And so we extended our maturities a little bit to kind of capture some of where rates are right now, in anticipation that in future years, the curve might shift down a little bit. Or I won't say that's a bet that we're taking, but it's just how we're thinking about the markets. So we wanted to lock in those higher rates now and basically ride the yield curve. But again, just going back to the cash, the earnings, what's kicking off from operations is consistent with what Ashley has communicated.
Okay, Dan, so that means you can't spend it for about 2 years, but then you can. Okay, thank you very much for that.
He will lean into it. Trust me, he will lean into it. But we can talk offline a little bit more. Okay.
I wanted to check any of our commissioners joining virtually if you have questions, and I cannot see if you do, so just start speaking. Okay, any others?
I just have a really quick questions about the PFC. Are we forecasting the same for 2026, the PFC, or
In terms of expenditures or
collections?
Yeah, let me answer that for you. So on the collections, like Ashley mentioned earlier, so tied to our employment, she characterized it as passengers, but our employments. So we forecasted this year for fiscal 26 that we would be up to about 9.5 million employments. So let's call it about 500,000. So that math will get us to a little bit more of that. I want to say it's around 38, but I'll get you the number, the specific number. But we have budgeted that in for fiscal 26.
That's all I needed. I mean, that was great. I just don't want us to go backwards.
The
No,
So
PSC,
that's good news.
the
Yeah.
PSC has been $4.50 for the past 23 years, 22 years. It should be changed. We've asked for it to be changed, but Congress would have to make that change.
Okay, we want to turn it over to Baker Tilly.
Thank you very much, Madam President and Commissioners. Happy to be here with you to give you the results of the 2025 audit. I think there's a slide that, yeah, there you go. So again, my name is Ashley Austin. I'm with a principal with Baker Tilly. We were previously Moss Adams. Moss Adams and Baker Tilly merged effective June 3rd. I gave you all of that spiel in the commission officers meeting earlier in June, but if you have questions after I'm done, I'm happy to answer them. Effectively, it makes no difference to you. I will continue to serve you as your overall relationship principal. I'll continue to sign your reports. You won't see a change in the team. We just have more consulting services to provide to you should you need them. And we're still focused on that middle market. So excited to be here. If you go to the next slide, the agenda is to talk a little bit about our auditor opinions and reports, go through a high level areas of where we focused on our audit, required communications with those charged with governance, which is this group, and then some other matters, which are just accounting pronouncements that the port will be implementing in 2026. Go to the next slide. Next slide. I always forget that you guys have the slide deck and run it, so I need to change my slides. Okay, so we have 4 auditor reports that we've issued. I'll start at the top. The first is the just general opinion on your financial statements, the report of independent auditors. That was an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion, highest level of assurance that you can receive. That's what you want to hear. That means your financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. The second report is the report of independent auditors required by Oregon state regulations. That is a report because you are an Oregon municipal corporation. We focus on things like budget compliance, procurement, investment compliance. If you changed banks during the year, did you notify the state? Those types of things. It's very control and compliance driven. No control findings, no compliance findings. If you had an over expenditure in a budget line item, you'd see that reported here. The third report is the report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance in relation to government auditing standards. If we had a large adjustment, if we had a material weakness or a significant deficiency, those would be reported in this report. But as you can see, no financial reporting findings and no compliance findings were reported. The fourth report is the report on compliance with requirements applicable to the PFC program. So the PFC program has its own guide. We look at that guide and we perform specific procedures over the compliance requirements included in that guide. As you can see, no control findings and no compliance findings were reported in that report. If you go to the next slide, please. The one report that was not issued and is in draft form is, as Ashley mentioned, the report on compliance related to the major program that we tested in terms of the single audit. So just to back up a little bit, the Office of Management and Budget each year issues a compliance supplement. That compliance supplement includes all of the things that that federal agency in your particular circumstance, the FAA, the Department of Transportation, they list out all the various compliance requirements that they care about. It usually doesn't change significantly year over year, but they do issue it every single year. It's usually issued in May. It is November. That 2025 compliance supplement has still not been issued. We can't issue a report on draft guidance. So unfortunately, we are not able to issue our report on whether or not you complied with the directed material compliance requirements. We performed our audit procedures and completed them based on the draft compliance supplement. And we don't have any findings to share, but when the compliance supplement is issued, which the timeline is very uncertain. The government is shut down. Hopefully it will reopen this week, but that is on the bottom of the priority list to get that thing issued. There's also been some change in the personnel that are responsible for that compliance supplement as a result of the administration. So there's really no known timeline. Once we do get the updated final compliance supplement, we will double check that our procedures are sufficient, and then we will issue that report in final and that package in final. But like I said, at this time, no control or compliance findings were identified. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about areas of audit emphasis. Next slide. So we come in September, the first week in September, and we finish up pretty much the second week in October. So we're here for about 6 to 7 weeks. So I'm going to give you a really high level of all the things that we did in those 6 to 7 weeks while we were on site, and we do a hybrid approach. We focus on your internal control environment. The port has very good internal controls, and we spend a lot of time looking at them. Things like revenue, leases, capital assets, payroll, your environmental liability. We also look at information technology general controls. So we have an IT team that comes in and looks at change management, user access, other operational controls related to your IT systems. We also focus on management estimates. As you know, those are where management can bias the financial statement information. So things like your environmental remediation liability, legal contingencies, depreciation, those are all very large estimates and that can have a big impact on your financial statements. We looked at all those estimates that are listed on this slide and didn't have any concerns. Your net pension liability and OPEB liability together on your financial statements is about $114 million. So a large liabilities. It is a significant portion of your financial statements, so we spend a lot of time looking at that, look at the reports from the state, from PERS, et cetera. Didn't have any issues with that, the amounts that were reported. The bond activity, of course, you had a new debt issued during the year, Series 2030. We confirmed that new debt. We confirm all debt every single year. We also looked at discounts and premiums, the repayments that you made, and if you're compliant with all the covenants that you are required to be compliant with. Capital assets. Of course, you know you have a huge capital program going on at the airport. We look at additions, retirements, and depreciation. In terms of revenue recognition, we look at, you have various streams of revenue. So we do a lot of analytics on your operating revenue streams using business indicators, things like in-plane, deplane passengers, landed weights, other things that are included in your business indicators. We confirm property tax revenue. We look at your investment income, PFC and CFC revenue, and then also your federal grants through our single audit procedures, and also consider just the overall collectability of receivables. If you go to the next slide, please. Leases was a big deal about 5 years ago. It continues to be a large receivable number and deferred inflow of resources on your financial statements. We look at any material new leases that occur during the year. We also look at any modifications of existing leases and look at the just overall completeness of that lease receivable, making sure that every lease that needs to be recorded is recorded. Net position, we just look at the consideration of the classification between unrestricted, restricted, and the net investment in capital assets. That net investment in capital assets is a number that gets a lot of scrutiny if you were to go ahead and submit your financial statements for the GFOA Certificate of Excellence Award. So we do look at that number and make sure that it's classified appropriately. Information technology, as I mentioned, we review change management, security and access, as well as operation controls. In the single audit, we focused this year on your contract dredging contract with the, who is it with? Corps of Engineers. I just could see COE in my head, I'm sorry. Totaling $25.5 million in expenditures. That was, your total CFO was about $60.6 million. The other large portion of it is Airport Improvement Fund. And then the unpredictability procedure, we are required to perform one every single year. There was that transition between controllers. As you know, Bob left, Ashley came on, so we looked at some journal entries during that vacancy. Didn't note any issues. Okay, if you go to the next slide, and again, the next slide after that. So this is just our general caveat slide. The first box there, we are here to express our opinion on whether the financial statements prepared by management are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Of course, our audit doesn't relieve management or you of your responsibilities. We do perform our audit in accordance with our professional standards and design the audit to obtain reasonable rather than absolute assurance. So we set a materiality. We don't look at every dollar or every transaction. We do consider on internal control, but we don't issue an opinion on that internal control. And then finally, we communicate findings that in our judgment are relevant to your responsibilities. If you go to the next slide. So I'm going to go from left to right here. We did communicate our plan, scope, and timing to the Ports Commission officers back in our meeting with you in June. This would be my opportunity to let you know if there were any changes to that plan. There were no changes. We performed audit fieldwork between September and October. We issued before October 31st. I think it was October 24th, which is what we set out to do when we met with you originally. The significant accounting policies and unusual transactions. The significant accounting policies are included in the Port's financial statements in footnote 1. If you don't read any other footnote in the financial statements, really recommend that you read that one because that's how management records and accounts for all of their transactions throughout the year. Ashley already mentioned that the port adopted GASB 101 compensated absences. It did result in a restatement of a minor amount. It wasn't significant. That did require that the port already recorded vacation leave, but any sick leave that is more than likely to be used, not necessarily paid out, just to be used, is also to be recorded as a liability. So that took some analysis by management. Not listed on this slide, but GASB 102 was also adopted, but had no impact to the port's financial statements. That would just have required, if there was any significant risk, concentration, or constraint that would have made the port vulnerable to a significant impact within 12 months of the financial statements, then there needs to be some disclosure in the financial statements. There was no such thing, so that was a standard that didn't really impact the port's financial statements. Finally, on this slide, management judgments and accounting estimates. I mentioned that management does have a lot of management estimates in the financial statements. We looked at all of those, as I mentioned on the previous slide, and deemed them all significant. All significant estimates were reasonable. Go to the next slide. We also point out financial statement disclosures that are particularly sensitive to the user of the financial statement. So I already pointed out note 1, but note 6, which talks about your leases, it's just a significant balance on the financial statements at this point. Note 7, obviously you have a lot of long-term debt, describes that in detail. And then note 13, commitments and contingencies, that talks about any commitments that the airport is committed to, that it's going to spend and contract with at the end of the year, as well as your environmental liability is disclosed in that footnote. We didn't have any significant difficulties encountered during our audit procedures. That would be, we weren't able to access a specific individual. We weren't able to obtain information that we requested. None of that happened. In terms of corrected and uncorrected audit adjustments, so just as a reminder, we receive a trial balance from management at the beginning of the audit. They do a post-close and then they do a post-retro. So we start with the post-close. We also have to perform audit procedures while they're doing their retro close. So we also obtained the environmental remediation liability analysis and identified a small error that resulted in a $1.2 million increase to expense and increase to liability. That was fixed in the post-retro close. Overall, it wouldn't rise to a material threshold. It would be a proposed adjustment if they had elected not to post it, but they posted it. And it was really as a result of the fact that there was that transition in controllers. No uncorrected audit adjustments identified, and that was the only corrected audit adjustment that we identified during our audit procedures. If you go to the next slide. So just this is a reminder that the port is subject to potential legal proceedings and claims. We do a variety of procedures. We confirm with all of the attorneys that the airport uses throughout the year. We also get a letter from Dan. We confirm that those items that are listed in those letters are appropriately disclosed or accrued for in the financial statements. We didn't have any disagreements with management. That would be related to an accounting or auditing matter that we encountered during the audit. And then we didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies identified during our audit procedures. You go to the next slide. Management's consultation with other accountants is really kind of high level, talking about opinion shopping. That would be if management went to another CPA firm, asked them a question, that CPA firm would then be required to contact us and let us know and make sure they had all the facts and circumstances, not aware of any of those. And in terms of other material written communications, you're privy to all of those other than the contract. We also perform 2 agreed upon procedures engagements for the port after we issue the audited financial statements, and then the management representation letter that we ask management to sign before we issue our opinions in final for both the financial statements and the PFC audit reports. There were no other significant written communications. And then in terms of material uncertainties, we are required to let you know that we are not concerned with you continuing on for more than 12 months. And finally, that next slide is we did not become aware of any instances of fraud or noncompliance with laws and regulations. And if you go 2 slides, I'll just talk briefly high level about the 2 new standards that are applicable for the port's 2026 fiscal year. GASB 103, that impacts a variety of statements and items in your financial statements. Most significant is the MD&A. It really removes any duplicative information that used to be included in the MD&A. Sometimes individual clients will talk about one change 4 or 5 different times within the MD&A. So it's removing that. It's also kind of reorganizing the geography of the MD&A. It has some specific requirements around the proprietary statements for the income statement. Talking about subsidies, you guys already record PFCs and non-operating revenue, but I think some airports are kind of considering whether or not those are actually operating. So that will be interesting to see next year where those land. And then there's some other items in there, unusual and infrequent items, things that don't exist in your financial statements today, but things that you will need to be aware of going forward. GASB 104, this is just taking all of those lease assets, right of use assets, lease liabilities, and then the subscription-based IT arrangement assets and liabilities. So the assets that are associated with those now need to be in your capital asset footnote disclosure instead of broken out separately. That will be a small change. And then it has some additional disclosure requirements related to land held for sale. If you go to the next slide. Just wanted to give a few acknowledgements to the staff, and we do our audit procedures, as I mentioned, both in person and remote. We do have meetings every Friday between us and management to talk about our open items, talk about questions, things that we've identified, those types of things. We also felt like everybody that we encountered was super responsive. We obviously received all of our requests in a timely manner, and we just felt the tone at the top was really great. I will also add, and I didn't include this on the slide, that seeing a large transition in a position such as a controller can make an auditor a little bit nervous, especially right before the audit. But to see that it came, Ashley, I think, started in June, and to see us issue on time, that is a huge accomplishment and says a lot about the controls and all the things that are happening behind the scenes. So thank you again. Thank you. And then if you go to the next slide, I think it's just our contact information, my name and contact information, the concurring principal's name, Olga Darlington, who is a new concur because our old concur, Lori Tisch, retired. And then David Levitsky is the manager who runs the engagement. So if I leave here today, feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you might have, but please ask away, open it up.
Thank you very much. Questions? Sure, go ahead.
First, thank you to both Ashleys, and then congratulations, Ashley Tuttle, for the great job, again, sort of stepping in right before an audit. On one of the slides you mentioned about information technology, and you started with 3 kind of key pieces, the review of change management, security access, and operations. The last 2 make sense to me. Can you tell me the kinds of things that you're looking for with respect to the review of change management in the conversation around information technology?
Yes, that's a great question. So change management really just relates to how do those systems go through software updates? How are those put through? Who approves those software updates? How are they run in the background before they go live? Who has access to kind of push those into production, basically? And kind of the segregation of duties around those. That's really all that it relates to.
Or just to clarify, so that's not, you don't offer an opinion on management's acceptance of certain kinds of technology, just to be clear.
No. It's just how the changes within the software that impact financial reporting are pushed into production.
Thanks.
Good clarification.
Any of our commissioners online? Not seeing Commissioner Nemi.
Welcome, Ashley. Thank you, Ashley. And we were just over here chatting and saying just how impressive you are, Antoinette, and how appreciative we are to have your leadership at the helm of our finances. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is always nice to get a great audit report. It does not relieve us of our responsibilities. We hear that loud and clear. Okay, our next agenda item, Christina Kelchner.
Good morning, President Koba and commissioners. Switching gears from this excellent audit reports. It's very technical and detailed to the world of planning and envisioning for the future. So I'm Christina Kelchner, Chief Development Services Officer, and I'm pleased to introduce the next item, which is an update to our PDX Master Plan. We kicked off this process about 2 years ago when Commission approved our consultant contract. So we wanted to bring you an update of where we are in the process today and let you know that we are on track to bring the final back to you for approval in the spring. I do want to take a minute and thank Commissioner Luther for serving as our commission liaison over the past 2 years. Her insights have really been incredibly valuable for staff. We see she's about to get even busier with her new role at Columbia Sportswear. Sean and I were joking this morning that it must have been this high-profile role she had as commission liaison for the master plan that helped her be competitive for the job. So seriously, congratulations, Commissioner Luther, and we really have appreciated your engagement over the last couple of years. The update will be presented by Sean Loughran, our Planning and Development Director, and Aaron Ray, our Senior Manager of Aviation Long-Range Planning. If you don't know Aaron, he's really the driving force behind this project. He's a deep expert. He was the former president of the American Planning Association, and he teaches planning as an adjunct professor at PSU. So he brings his expertise, and he also brings a deep enthusiasm, and that's very genuine for engaging with the community. And I got to see this firsthand a couple of weeks ago. I was at a community open house for the project at University of Oregon's Portland campus. The room was buzzing with people visiting stations that were set up around the room, learning about cargo and curbsides and everything in between. And I was in mid-conversation, fascinating conversation about maintenance facilities, when Sean came up and said, "Come here, you got to see this." So I followed Sean across the room, and there was Aaron deep in conversation with 2 young people. And it turns out these were high school students, local high school students, that had prepared detailed drawings of the airfield, not for class, just for fun. And they had lots of ideas that they were eager to share. And so here was Aaron just poring over these drawings with the students and really geeking out with them over gates and taxiways. So it was great to see, and a really a wonderful reminder of the importance of the role that the port plays in the community. So the master plan gives us an opportunity to think strategically, looking 20 years ahead to understand our future needs and our options to meet those needs. It's not a blueprint with fixed instructions. It doesn't tell us what to build or when to build it, but it's a guide, a tool to help us make smart and flexible decisions over time. The world-class terminal building that we're almost finished delivering is a result of the last master planning process just over 10 years ago. So now we're asking, with this master planning update, what will it take for the next generation, like these high school students, to have a world-class airport that they're just as proud of as we are of airport today? So with that, I will turn it over to Sean and ask Sean and Aaron to come up and give you the update.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate the introduction. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, President Koba. It's nice to be here for an information item and get to talk about the master plan. It's what we love to do, and I think, as Christina described, we've got a great project manager. You're in good hands for this master plan with Aaron. We've got Jennifer Raby on our team that's in a role as a deputy project manager. She's great. We also got a great consulting team with Ricondo. And tonight we have a meeting with our planning advisory group, which is the community side, which also adds that third leg of the stool and that key piece that put us really in a great position to deliver the master plan. Aaron will go through a progress report on this, but there's a couple little things I wanted to share in terms of our approach, things that I think help in understanding how we go about the master plan. As Christina mentioned, in spring we'll finish TCOR, and we're going to finish a decade of investment. And I would say that it puts us in a great position for the challenges of the next 5, 10, and 20 years. And really the root of that, or the foundation for all of that work, was the last master plan. And importantly, it was the community's role that really is the foundation for that. I like to say that really when we talk about TCOR, it's rooted in the community's vision for what this airport should be. And I think that's really important. Curtis, in your remarks earlier, you talked about the importance of listening. and listening to understand. I think listening and learning in partnership with the community is really at the heart of what master planning is about. And we have that rare opportunity when we do a master plan for the community and the port to get to have a conversation about our shared long-term interest about what the airport should be. So it's really unique in that respect. But I think, that can be a little bit risky, and sometimes we really don't know where that community engagement process is going to go. But I think if we trust the process, if we are willing to listen, if we're willing to be influenced by different perspectives, we'll have great outcomes, and the outcomes will really be shared outcomes. And I think that's so important in our approach. The last master plan that we did, we called it Airport Futures. At the beginning, so much of the conversation was concerned about growth. It was really about, we really don't want this airport to change. We like the way it is. We don't like the uncertainty with growth. We don't like the impacts of growth. But through all of those meetings, I think what happened is the conversation changed from worried about growth to a conversation which is, what's most important to us if we do grow? What is it we want to preserve? What is it we want to cherish? What is it that we want to make sure is represented in that airport over the next 10 and 20 years? The final thing I just wanted to say is that, this is a planning process, and we're going to produce what we call an airport layout plan, graphic depiction of how the airport is going to develop over the next 20 years. And it's really an important piece of the work. But I would say that really it's the planning process, the debates, the discussions, the analysis of alternatives that are really going to put us in the best position we can be to deal with the things we haven't thought of, to deal with the uncertainty of the future, and to deal with whatever those challenges are. So, it always isn't captured and represented in the plan, but the work that goes into it are really what prepare us for the future.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's good to be back in front of the commission after the past couple of years. My name's Aaron Ray. I'm Senior Manager of Aviation Long Range Planning. I'm glad that Christina brought up the example from our prior open house with talking to those high school kids. I was one of those high school kids. My parents brought me to PDX to collect bag tags and timetables and walk the concourses when you could still do that, because it was frankly better for me than going to an amusement park. This has always been sort of my home. And so this project has been a lot of fun. And so what I'm going to be sharing today is some of the work we've done so far, and give you a preview of some of the different directions that the plan could take us as we finalize it and bring it back to you for adoption in 2026. So next slide. So as Christina and Sean mentioned, we're a couple years into this project by now, and that red line keeps moving to the right, whether we want it to or not. But the project team up till now has been focusing a lot on understanding what is the existing condition at PDX, especially after the investments we've been making in the new main terminal and all of the rest of the PDX Next program, looking at forecasts to understand what sort of demand in terms of passengers or in terms of aircraft or in terms of our landside that we'll need to accommodate going forward, and then starting to kick around different functional alternatives, which is what we'll focus on today, that will help us accommodate that growth over the next 20 years and also set the stage for a little bit beyond. The work that we have to do is to arrive at some conclusions from those alternatives of which might be the best strategy for us at PDX, and then start talking about, from an implementation perspective, what comes first, second, third, both in terms of a technical or a functional dependency, but also relating back to the port's mission and our strategy at PDX for our passenger experience, for our role in the region as an economic engine, to come up with then an implementation plan that we can hand to Dan so he can go ask for money and actually implement it like we just talked about. So, so this is, I would say, sort of for me, this is the fun part, where we get to start dreaming a little bit and work with the community and with all of you to come up with a firm direction going forward. What I'm going to start, though, is with the forecast, because that's really where our entire plan is rooted. And so if you go to the next slide, this shows our aviation demand forecast for passengers through 2045. You can clearly see the impacts of COVID in 2020. But based on our analysis, both of economic trends in our entire catchment area and also with the airline industry overall, we are projecting a growth rate through 2045 of about 3.3% a year. That takes us to, in 2045, about 34 million annual passengers, which is fantastic because that's exactly where we thought we would be when we were planning for the new main terminal. So that's a confirmation of our prior planning work that goes into that project. To accommodate 34 million annual passengers, we'll need somewhere between 8 to 10 additional gates. And we'll go through some different strategies to that we could approach to get that new capacity. But we're also trying to match that gate investment with other investments that we'd be making at PDX anyway over that time period. So, for instance, we know our international arrivals experience needs some work. We know that after the new main terminal, now there are other parts of the airport that require the same sort of asset investment to bring their resiliency or their level of service standards up. So we're trying to pair those two things together. On the next slide, we'll also look at the forecast for the airfield. So this graph shows takeoffs and landings on an annual basis through 2045. And this is a very different story because if you notice between 2000 and now, our overall activity in terms of takeoffs and landings has gone down despite our passenger enplanements going up. That's because airlines have gotten much, much more efficient at flying larger aircraft and flying them full. So from an airfield perspective, it means we're getting a lot of efficiency out of the airfield that we have. And by 2045, we will just be reaching the historic peak that we hit at PDX back in 1997 in terms of takeoffs and landings. So that's a great story for us. What that means in shorthand is that the airfield we have will serve us well going forward. And while we'll need to do some investments, and certainly in asset management or some small efficiency improvements, we're probably not looking at a major airfield project to add additional capacity in the next 20 years. Next slide. So what we'll go through on the next couple slides are some ideas that we're kicking around to accommodate all of this activity going forward. Next slide, please. So the alternatives that I'm going to show you have gone through a lot of different steps of refinement to get to, I would say, this pre-finalist state that we're at right now. So obviously our consultant team is where all of these ideas started, and then we're refined through the port, or a number of port technical work groups. So our aviation operations, our landside operations, our terminal operations teams, all taking a look at these and providing their input. We have a fantastic project core team of managers across the port in different functional areas that are sort of the steering committee for this project. Then we take them to our advisory committees, our planning advisory committee, which I'll talk about in a moment, and also a collection of interagency partners that we vet these through, and then through public engagement and input. So what you're going to see today has gone through most of these, all of these stages actually, for the pieces we're showing you today. So everything you're seeing is technically possible. It's been vetted by our subject matter experts, and we think these could be things we could live with going forward. Next slide. Sean mentioned our planning advisory committee, and I just want to take a moment and talk about the important role of this group, which will be meeting in this room tonight. So planning advisory committees are our way of going out to the community to make sure we have the external knowledge, skills, and experience around the table to really give us advice on what decisions to make. When we started this project, we decided very intentionally to take a different approach to our planning advisory committee than we have in the past. And so we started with understanding what is that collection of knowledge, skills, and experience from the community that we need. And then we sort of just threw it out there and said, how can you help us? Rather than saying, we want one seat from this group and one seat from that group and being very regimented, we kind of just sent it out there and said, do you want to participate? How can you help us? We thought we would have to kind of pull teeth to get people involved, but we got over 100 people applying for spots, for about 20 spots in our committee, which is shown here on an airfield tour at our ground run-up enclosure. And I'll tell you, this is the most fun and I would say engaged and productive community advisory committee that I've ever been ever had the pleasure of working with. They are providing meaningful input into the alternatives, and I think really bringing the community's voice into our work. So very, very grateful to this group and to their contributions over the past couple of years. Next slide. We're also doing a number of community open houses. This one, the picture here was at a couple weeks ago at the University of Oregon Concordia campus in Northeast Portland. We'll continue the community open houses. I should say we also did one last week in Vancouver. We'll continue this series in the spring as we refine these. And we're also providing all of this information online for those who aren't able to attend or would like to just go through things on their own. And at this point, we're the estimate right before coming to commission is we've touched about 400 people in the community through one of these avenues and gotten their input at some point along the process. So we're pretty pleased with that. Next slide. Okay, so we'll go through some of the functional alternatives and talk about some of the feedback that we've gotten from our planning advisory committee so far. So our crosswind runway, or runway 321, which is there highlighted in red, all of our operations forecasts for the airfield have assumed that this crosswind runway is closed. And that's because for the past 5 years or so, it has been, because the roof laydown yard, the construction yard, was adjacent to it. So this runway has been effectively closed for the past 5 years, and we haven't needed it. It also no longer meets the FAA's standard for wind coverage to receive additional federal money should we need to, and at some point we will need to rebuild it or rehabilitate it. As the fleet serving PDX has modernized over the years, it no longer depends on that crosswind runway in unusual weather events in order to land. Aircraft need to take off and land into the wind. But over the years, the necessity of that runway for the fleet has gone down, and we've found that airlines actually prefer just using the north and south runways. So it's a potential liability in terms of additional costs to maintain. It's also in the way, as we'll talk about here in a second. So there are some considerations to removing the crosswind runway or at least converting it maybe into a taxiway, which frees up some options for the terminal, which are on the next slide. Okay, so for terminal alternatives or terminal expansion, we're really looking at 4 variations on themes to accommodate the 8 to 10 gates that we need to build between now and 2045. You'll notice each of these on the blue areas highlight the proposed or potential expansions of those concourses. Where the blue diamond says IAF, that's our international facility. But I want to be really clear that it is not the international facility today. All of these alternatives will solve the problem of the bus. So just because it might still be on Concourse D doesn't mean it's the status quo. So you can see we have options to expand to the west on concourses C and D, or alternately on concourses D and E. But any of that western expansion will require us to close the crosswind runway. So those pieces are tied. We also have the opportunity, we're looking at a larger expansion of Concourse E that could serve as a new international arrival facility and might also give us some opportunities to have additional curbside. Curbside is one of the areas that we're really going to be pinched on going forward. And if you think about the configuration of the facility isn't getting any wider. So that cul-de-sac that we kind of drive through is the one we're going to have going forward. So finding additional curbside is a big challenge that we're facing. So that international arrivals facility off of Concourse E could give us an opportunity to address some of that. That also might be a little bit easier to build because we're not necessarily building on top of ourselves. Although I will say we've gotten pretty good at that over the past few years. So the feedback we've gotten on this is to really prioritize updating older facilities first, try to get everything we can out of the investments that we've made so far. We've also heard very clearly from our planning advisory committee that walking distances are a big challenge. And so we're paying a lot of attention to making sure that whatever alternatives we do end up considering as finalists provide the necessary space to help aid that journey or provide additional ways in to shortcut that, because we know that's a big concern. Just one geeky fact about that Concourse E expansion, the walk distance from the center of the terminal to the end of the E extension with the international arrivals facility will be about 3,200 feet. 3,500 feet is the standard at which a consultant will recommend implementing something like a train, like an automated people mover beyond just the moving sidewalk. So we're pushing it there. We know that, and we're looking at strategies to mitigate that. Next slide. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but we're looking to help to address what we know is an issue with our curbside. So we have a lot of different ideas in terms of either small asset investments or some small capital investments to realize more curb. But there are also ways that we could change the way that we use the facilities that we have to get us more capacity. For instance, one thing under consideration is requiring Uber and Lyft passengers arriving to the terminal to arrive in the first floor of the short-term parking garage in the transportation plaza rather than at the curb. That takes off some traffic off of Airport Way, but it's a change in the passenger experience. So we're really trying to be careful about that. But that's one opportunity to use a management strategy rather than having to build our way out of it. Next slide. And then finally, we're looking at various alternatives for parking. So even though we expect employments to roughly double between now and 2045, we think our parking inventory need will be in the area of 25 to 50%. So we know we're going to have to build some. We won't have to build as much as our passengers are going to grow. So that's one piece of good news. There's one site left for a close-in walkable parking garage. We're calling it P4. It's the surface lot right out here where the construction trailers are. I would say there's pretty high likelihood that that'll come into the mix here. But then we're also looking at other opportunities for on-airport sites with shuttle access that might utilize the shuttle bus system that we have in place today. One idea that we're trying to explore a little bit more is realizing that regionally we have a lot of underutilized parking that's not on airport but could be connected with PDX through like an express bus system. LAX has the Flyaway bus system. Boston has the Logan Express. It's a similar sort of model. We're probably less far along on this concept because we want to understand to what extent would it be a practical alternative, because we would want to understand operationally how would it work, financially how would it work. But we think that there could be some opportunity there. It also allows us a way to be a little more nimble with our parking. Parking's really hard to build because you have to build it in chunks, and by definition, especially when you get to things like parking garages, you're overbuilding and then demand catches up and then you're overbuilding again. So this may be a strategy where we can be a little bit more nimble. One other piece of feedback that we got from our planning advisory committee is to intensify the areas that we already have parking before we disturb new greenfield sites. So for instance, putting garages on either the economy site, the red or blue economy lot, or on the Alderwood employee site would be better than, say, putting a new greenfield parking garage somewhere in Cascade Station. So we're taking that into consideration as well. Next slide. And finally, I'll just touch on this really quickly. The way that we approach planning for all of the different pieces at PDX is we figure out these large terminal landside parking investments first, but we always keep in mind our cargo facilities, general aviation, our support facilities that are critical to the airport, like public safety, our wildlife management facilities. And so we're trying to group similar uses in proximity. We're trying to understand, especially our airport maintenance facility needs and how they relate going forward. We think we're in good shape there, but we have a little bit of work to do. And then also talking with public safety to understand how we can plan the facilities they'll need for fire and ARF and our emergency response going forward. Next slide. Okay, just a couple more slides, then I'll take questions. I want to talk a little bit about how we evaluate all of this, because there are a lot of alternatives that we have out there, and we're getting a lot of input both internally and externally. So our evaluation approach on the next slide, we're using a framework called EONS, which is an airport industry framework that's been used at a number of airports across North America that really take a sort of this triple bottom line lens, but put them into more airport speak categories. So we look at things from an economic perspective and operational perspective. We look at natural resources impacts or advantages, and then we also look at our social responsibility. And I would even call that shared prosperity other than environmental. But we try and standardize this framework across those different functional areas. So for instance, we'll look at efficiency as one of those, facility efficiency is one of those metrics, but the way you measure that on the airfield and the way you measure that in the terminal might be a little bit different. So the measures are the same, even if the individual metrics adapt to the functional areas, but we're trying to build this pretty standardized evaluation framework. The other advantage to this approach is when we necessarily put this plan, get this plan approved and start implementing it, 10 years from now, someone will have to pick it up, and hopefully it'll still be me, but someone will have to understand the method to our madness. And so if we can document the evaluation and how we arrived at the conclusions that we did, as Sean said, because this is a strategic document, that's the best outcome we can have from the master plan. So we're really looking forward to having that. Next slide. So our next steps, actually, I have late breaking news on this slide. Our online open house is actually going to be open through December 1st instead of November 14th. We'll be doing some employee-focused engagement, both on PDX and for port employees, starting in the next couple of weeks. And then in winter of 2026, we'll be doing another cycle of open house engagement for our preferred alternative. In spring of 2026, we'll be coming back to you for adoption of our plan. And then by summer of 2026, we send it off to our partners at the FAA for their review and approval. And then we look forward to the next one another 10 years from now. All of our information, both the summaries and if you want to get to the geeky detail, it's all available on our project website, pdx2045.org. It's also where our online survey is right now. So if you want to share that with your networks, that's the best place to send them. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Sean. Thanks, Christina. I wanted to turn first to Commissioner Luther, who, as mentioned, was the commission liaison to this effort, and just see any thoughts you want to share or comments. We greatly appreciate all of your work in this area.
Yes, thank you. I think the overwhelming comment I think you saw from Aaron's passion and just the dedication that Sean and Aaron bring to that work, that it is really incredible to watch the thoughtfulness. And trust me, I have tried every hard question I can to stump these two, and it's impossible. The thoughtfulness that goes into this work, and just the data-rich environment that it started in, it really is something to be proud of. I think all of us understand from working with the port the thoughtfulness and the depth of the talent on the team, but I had to sort of giggle when I heard Aaron share that story about being a kid, running around collecting these things. I think that level of passion should give all of us comfort that no stone is unturned. And I would just say that, it's easy to talk about shared prosperity as a concept, but when you see it come alive and how that work in terms of really careful thought about who's going to be in the room and prevent what are our own blind spots of what we don't see when we are thinking about how this the future of the airport serves our community, and truly treating it as a community asset and then letting those people in the community shape it. It's really inspirational, and I just can't say enough about how much I am grateful to have people like Sean and Aaron lead this kind of work for what I consider to be I know I'm biased, but one of the, greatest assets and that this community has.
Thank you, Commissioner. Much appreciated. I know. Questions, comments?
Well, I really enjoy what you just shared about the collection of knowledge, right? And in the growth, what is the most important for our community? Because until we find that what's important, that's really the purpose for our people. So it would be a really hard work to boil it down to what is the real purpose. And 2045, I'm shocked that I'm sitting here 2025 and then doing the work for 2045. I don't even know what's next week, yet alone planning for the next, 20 years, right? And I think that's creating the purpose for our next generations, doing the work that is so critical. But I really like to see how do we embrace technology in this work, because everything's going to change so fast. This master plan is very different than the one that we did 20 years ago, right? We need to embrace technology in our master plan because the next generations, they don't want to do with paper. They don't want to read. They don't want to park. Everything is robotic, right? So how is that embracing in the work that we're doing, the planning? So I'm excited, but thank you for the work that you're doing.
No, that's a great point. Thank you.
Commissioner Devon.
Yeah, I'm too. I'm fascinated by all of this planning work, and it's a great job. You put a number of variables in play, right, this presentation, and it may be unfair to ask you about your hunch about which of those variables that you put in play are the ones, is the one that's most interesting. I have a hunch, and I don't want to bias you, so I'm just curious if we're on the same page here.
So I am Switzerland when it comes to these right now. I will say, again, everything I've shown you has been vetted through these different layers, and I think the most important one, to the conversation about are these all real or not, is all of the internal port subject matter expertise, which has been critical to this project. We know operationally we can live with any of these, and so really it comes down to finding out from the community and then weighing that in. So if you have a favorite, there is an opportunity to rank them on that survey. So please you can do it under a fake name. It's fine. But we would appreciate, any of that. Do I have a favorite? I do. And maybe when I come back in the spring, I'll tell you if that's where we landed.
We try really hard to keep everybody from picking too early, including maybe our executive team who might have favorites too.
I don't know. He's waving his hand.
Sean, I have comments.
Right. I especially the gentleman behind me. But everybody, it would be easy to latch on to something early, and then you would shortchange the process. And there might be things we would learn about alternatives that we haven't seen yet. So we're just going to keep an open mind, and we'll see where this goes.
And I just wanted to add, thank you. I'm not Switzerland, but your point is well taken. But I think the other thing, Commissioner, to really think about is even if we have a preferred alternative, the other alternatives are viable. And it helps us not do things that take those opportunities out in the future. So we'll get to a preferred alternative and move on a development plan, but we won't forget that we have other options, especially as technology changes and how people travel, types of aircraft we see. And I just want to call that out as well. We're going to have a preferred alternative. The whole work is valuable to us in the future. We don't just discard the ones we don't choose.
That's right.
Commissioner Nemi.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, a little mind boggled. There's so much I think we don't know about 2045. So trying to imagine that takes a lot of imagination. I just, I guess comments here on this seems very grounded in structure of the airport facilities. And, I think what makes Portland a great airport is the people. My mic is weird. So I think what's great about the Portland Airport is the people. And so I would just encourage the committee to be thinking about the people that work at PDX and how we continue to make sure that our master plan includes a plan for them to all have good jobs that allow them to live close to the airport or in the region, and sustain their lives. And, especially the communities that have been overlooked are Black and Brown and immigrant and refugee communities. So that's a point I would make. And then in terms of like facilities, I hear the comment on the walking and the walking distance as someone, at this point in my life who's fully able to walk those distances and glad about it. But we do have an aging population, and there are long distances to walk in our airport. So, just continue the work on looking at that. And then another piece that I just don't see in here, and when I talk to folks who travel into Portland, that this isn't their home base, the desire for more hotel opportunities that are near our airport is something that I hear talked about. And so would encourage you all to think about that.
Those are great comments and good input. Thank you, Commissioner Nimi. The hotel piece is not something that I had heard yet, so we will add that, and we'll have a look at that and see. To the point about, especially about PDX employees, we are, as I mentioned, starting some focused engagement with that group now. We've gotten PDX employee representation on the Planning Advisory Committee, but we've been spending a lot of time thinking about how do folks get to and from work. How do our current systems either serve or not serve them? Where are the gaps and how can we fill them? We're making, I think, really good progress on some aspects of that, even outside the master plan. But that has been a key piece of thinking about how can we make sure we have good opportunities for PDX employees to get to and from work. Once they're here, do they have what they need in terms of facilities? So that has been part and parcel to what we've been talking about.
We get asked all the time, what is the secret sauce that makes PDX special? And it's not one thing, it's 100 different things, but the employees are at the core of that. And we've got some engagement that's focused on them as well, making sure we're listening to the people that actually work here.
Mr. Lamb.
I just like to add in, while we're doing this listening and learning work, it is keep in mind that we are the Portland International Airport. So our focus in learning, not just local, but also global. So when we lead the work, we're creating the experience for international passenger as well as local. So that's something that I just want to point it out, because I think the experience is for both. And that's how we really focus on and capturing the full growth of the airport that we're building for. Thank you.
It's a great point. I would say I don't think we've met with Commissioner Luther yet where she hasn't raised to us the importance of international service and bringing that to a standard that's consistent with the other amenities we have at the airport. Yeah.
And I would just point out also that when we think back to that terminal slide with all the little blue diamonds of IAF, we're now getting to the point in the project where we're pulling the thread on that maybe a little bit more than we might in other aspects of just regular gate expansion. So we know for an international arrivals facility investment, is it something we can do in a time frame that is acceptable to us? Is it going to deliver the level of service and the experience for international arrivals or international passengers that we're giving to other passengers that are, really going through a beautiful facility? So we're spending a lot of time to make sure we have a plan to address that as feasibly quickly as we can. Let's put it that way.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I share my fellow commissioners' mind-boggling thought that we're planning for 2045. Wow. So good luck to you all. I'm wondering where our flying luggage is going to fit into all of this. Thank you for a great presentation, and we look forward to hearing the next step at commission meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, that's the end of our agenda, unless anyone has anything they forgot to add. If not, have a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Thank you.
Did I adjourn the meeting? Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah. Wow.